Okay, so hi, hello, assalamu alaikum, everybody. How are you? Or for my brief time, Egypt is Zayik. Everybody good? Good, good. That's what I want to see. So I'm Shaheen Pasha. I am a journalist. I've been a journalist for about 20 years now, and I've worked for places like CNN and Thomson Reuters and the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones. So, I've had a long history in journalism. I'm also a professor. I'm an assistant professor at Penn State University in Pennsylvania, United States. And I used to actually teach at the American University in Cairo, which is how I know your professor, because she was my student. So, and my assistant. She was also my assistant too. So she was my TA. So we have a very long relationship. What Nihal, it's been like over 10 years, right? Like we've known each other?
Oh, more.
More than that, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, because I came in 2007. So we've known each other for a very long time. Um, she told me that you guys are working on, some projects with with obviously journalism projects, but you're specifically taking a look at how narrative journalism plays out in, VR and virtual reality and all of that. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about what narrative journalism is. So does anybody have an idea? When I say something about narrative journalism, do you know what that means? Okay, I see a big hand up. Nihal, you're gonna have to tell me what people are saying. Or you can come right up to the screen and I will see your face very big so I can hear you.
When I hear the word journalism or narrative, I think of
It's okay.
I think of newspapers and like articles in general.
Mhm. Yep. So when you
Yes.
think of narrative journalism, you think of articles and newspapers, right? So good.
Mostly political stuff.
I
Mostly.
can't hear.
Uh,
Okay, I can't hear you.
okay, so I think of like stuff that are mostly political.
Okay, and that's good. So you think of politics. Perfect. So you see narrative journalism as articles and newspapers, a lot of it political. All right, good. So I'm going to ask you, and since you're standing right in front of me, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask everybody, do you read books? Oh my God, that makes me sad. Go. So who reads books? Who reads books here? Like, okay, good. Who reads fiction books? Like a Harry Potter even? You guys read? Okay, good. So Harry Potter is one of my favorite series. Now, when you think of a fiction book and you think of a fiction novel, whether it's a Harry Potter or some other kind of novel, what are the things that you really like? Okay, I'm gonna ask this. Does everybody have a favorite book? Who has a favorite book? Okay. All right. So think about what makes it your favorite book. Is it the story? Is it the character? Is it the conflict? Right? So when we read a book and we get really interested in the book, it's because something about that book appeals to us. It speaks to us as people. We get really excited and involved with the characters, whether it's the good guy, the hero of the book, or whether it's the villain of the book. And oftentimes I think the villain is very interesting in a book. So if you think about that and you think about how much you love your favorite book, I want you to kind of think about why we don't see that same interest naturally, or we don't connect that to journalism. Because journalism is supposed to be, could be an article, it could be something on video, but journalism at its heart, it's storytelling. Basically, what you're doing is you are going into someone's life. You are going into this world of characters, something that has happened to people, a conflict or a message that people want to tell. And when you're out there looking for stories, one of the first things that you have to look for is, who do I interview, right? How do I find an interview? Who can I get to be on camera, or who can I get to give me quotes? What you don't realize is what you're doing in that moment is you're looking for characters. You're looking for characters that are going to be interesting and get people excited or really engaged in whatever the story is that you're doing. That is what narrative journalism is. All journalism should be storytelling at its heart. You're absolutely providing information, but if you're not providing information that's interesting, no one's going to read it, right? So if you're somebody that's interested in politics, as he mentioned, or somebody that's interested in entertainment, or someone that's interested in war reporting, something like that, you can be interested in it, but you're interested because something about the people that are being interviewed, the stories that are being told, draw you into that story. You can have an amazing piece of information about politics. You're explaining the law about something, but if you're not connecting it to human beings and you are not connecting it to someone's personal story, no one's going to read it, no one's going to watch it. So when I ask people, you know, if they like books or if they read books or if they watch television, I'm going to ask this: how many of you guys watch television shows? Watch Netflix? Okay, their hands go up more. All right. You know, a good Netflix show within 10 minutes, right? Like if it's not interesting within 10 minutes, you're not going to sit there and binge watch it over a weekend. All right. What you have to think about with journalism is that it's nonfiction, but in a way it's entertainment. It has to engage the people. It has to make people want to read past the first 3 paragraphs, right? Most people, when they get their news, they look at the headline, they look at the lead, and maybe they look at another paragraph and they get their information. But what makes people come back to that story is who you've chosen to tell it, okay? So I wanted to kind of today sort of get your mind around that. You can have all the technology in the world. You can have the most amazing virtual reality. You can have the most amazing sound equipment or the most amazing, you know, camera. But if what you're doing with it is boring and doesn't actually tell a story, it's a waste of money. It doesn't actually do anything. Okay. So I'm going to later on in the session, I'm going to show you guys an 8-minute video. It's on YouTube, but it was an 8-minute video that was submitted to Sundance. It's really good. And it talks about the lives of these Thai fishermen who've been sold into slavery, basically. Okay. And that's a really powerful story. But what they chose to do with this specific film, in this 8-minute film, is they chose to tell it through a 360 kind of virtual reality mode. Since it's on YouTube and we don't have our mobile phones to be able to do it, I can't show you how it looks, but I want you to hear the story because that's the narrative part that I want you to kind of listen to. So I wanted to go a little bit into what narrative journalism actually is, okay? As we mentioned, it's storytelling. It's about putting a face and a person's personal experience and personal story at the forefront of a larger issue, okay? So what you have to do when you're out there trying to tell a story, when you're out there trying to do narrative journalism, which I hope all of you are supposed to be doing, and I'm hoping that you're all doing with whatever medium that you're using, you have to examine certain questions. The first thing you have to do is to understand the story, the message. What is the point of this piece that you're putting together, whether it's a print piece or a video piece or an audio piece or whatever? You have to look at what the scope is of this message. Who does it impact? How many people does this have an effect on? Who would be the audience that would be interested in something like this? Is this a story that you're aiming for a very narrow group of people that are already understand it? Or are you hoping for a larger audience, people that have never known anything about this world to become interested in the story? So that's the first question you have to think of to determine whether it's even an interesting story. Coming back to books or coming back to Netflix, we watch shows, we read books that are outside of our personal experience. They're about people who live lives that we have never seen, and yet we get drawn into it because it's aimed to sort of connect on certain human elements that everybody has experienced. That's the scope, okay? That's kind of the scope of what your story is that you want to answer before you even get started on the actual reporting. What is the aim? What is the message that you want your audience to take away from this piece of journalism? The next one is very simply, what is the story about? And this is where your lead is going to help you. Who, what, when, where, why, how. This is where you determine, okay, this is what the story is. This is how I'm going to narrow the focus. It's going to be about this specific topic, keeping in mind that the scope is going to be larger because the audience is going to be larger. People are going to identify with the story, even if they haven't personally lived it. But I have to be very specific about what my story is. And I don't want it to go off in too many tangents, because just like any good show, it has to be tight. If you have a series on Netflix that is going on for 20 episodes and it is just going from here to here to here and characters are all over the place, by episode 6, you stop watching. You're going, I don't know what the point of the story is. It's too much happening. There's no focus. I'm done. Same with journalism. You have to know what the story is about. You have to keep it very focused. The third thing you want to look at when it comes to narrative storytelling, what's the history? There's always a history to any story. There are people that have lived that issue before these people that you're talking about. There is a history, whether it's a society or a law or religion or, racism or anything like that, or any sort of conflict. It doesn't just start out of nowhere. There's always been a history of this. So you want to examine that, because history puts things into context. If we don't understand the history of a story, really what the backstory is of that, then we're not doing a very good job explaining it. With a book, one of the best things happens is when you start to discover the backstory of these characters, right? Like this conflict that you're seeing in the book, there's this long history before then, people that came before him or her that kind of shaped this person, and now this is happening. So what you always want to kind of look at with any piece of journalism that you're doing, is there history involved with it? Has this happened in other places? Has this happened to other people? Has some version of this happened a generation before to these people? Because you're then seeing the same sort of history replaying itself. So we look at what the scope is, we narrow the focus of what the story is about, and then we try to figure out if there's a history that we can explain a little bit about in order to provide context. Context is so important, because if you don't provide context, you can manipulate the way someone thinks about an issue. And that's not journalism, that's propaganda, because you then are allowing people to believe something that may not be true. So you always have to provide something in context, and looking at history helps with that. The other thing that you want to look at, what I'd say number 4, right, that you need to answer is, what is the reason? What is the central reason that this conflict or this story is happening? Is it a political reason? Is it something to do with the economy? Is it something to do with class and social constructs, right? Is it something to do with technology that's emerging? There are so many different ways to identify why you should do the story, why this story is even happening. Really important to be able to identify that as you're doing the reporting for narrative journalism, because that can help you find sources. Because if you identify something as a political story, oh, I can go talk to a political scientist. I can talk to a politician. I can talk to somebody who's an expert. If it's something that has an economic basis, an oppression that's based in economic history, I'm going to go talk to an economist. This is a way for you to be able to narrow down the types of sources that can provide you with some of that history and can provide you with some of that context. Number 5, what you need to look for, impact. If a story has no impact on anyone, why on earth are we telling? I mean, think about it. If you have friends, and I'm sure we all have friends that start talking and they tell a story, and then you have absolutely no idea why they just took up 10 minutes of your time telling you the story, because it had no impact on you whatsoever. Now take that to a larger audience that's trying to either read your work or trying to watch it or trying to listen to it. And they get through the story going, that did nothing for me. I have no idea why I just put myself through that. Then you didn't make the impact clear. So before you get into anything, before you do this piece of narrative journalism, you need to know what the impact is. Who's being affected? How are they being affected? How large is this population of people that's being affected? Because that's going to help determine how you shape the story. Number 6 is conflict. What are the contrary forces, the people that are against each other, for or against each other? What is their reasoning? And the thing is with conflict, people think it has to be something related to a fight, like I'm having a fight with you and it's got to be very obvious. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes conflict can be internal. It can be about something. You can do a story about somebody who's been raised in a certain community, and then they are now trying to leave that community or trying to start another community. And there may not be some actual violence or, you know, war coming out of that, but there's a conflict there with one group of people feeling a certain way and another person, another character feeling another way. That conflict is so important for stories. It has to be, because we need to see why are people thinking about this? What's the reason for it? So conflict is important. See if there's some butting of heads among your characters or in your story. And another one is, what's the future? If you're looking at narrative journalism in particular, it usually requires you to take a little bit of time telling a story through these characters. You don't want to just drop off if possible, you know? Is there a future? Maybe they don't know what their future is, but you want to address it. You want to kind of see if this story has impact going forward, or if this was just an individual story, what that person is going to do once that camera stops rolling or once that period hits the last paragraph. So you want to look at that. So once again, the things you want to examine as you're starting to think of narrative journalism: what's the scope of the story? What's the story actually about? What's your focus going to be? 3, what's the history? Is there any context that I need to explain? 4, what are the central reasons, political, economic, social, for this happening? What's the impact? How wide is this magnitude? And what are the contrary forces that are, you know, for and against, the conflict that's involved? And number 7, is there a future? Is there something that we need to look for in the future, or a question that we can ask? And the reason I say this is because when you're thinking about narrative storytelling, oftentimes we're more focused on just the mechanics of it. We're focused on writing the lead. We're focused on taking the shot, the perfect shot. And we don't see that if you don't have the storytelling, none of that's going to happen. Okay, so those are sort of the 7 questions that I want you guys to start thinking about as you are creating your projects. Put them into those boxes to see if you can shape your story better and find characters that will fit them. All right, which brings me to my next thing: stuff that absolutely should be in narrative writing, things that absolutely should be in your pieces, whether they are print or audio or video or whatever. The first thing you need: character. You all need to find good characters, people that we can, even if we don't like them, especially if we don't like them, but we can identify something about them. We see something in them that either repels us or interests us or is similar to us, even if it's somebody we absolutely don't agree with. So what you want to look at is a character that will kind of guide your story. Somebody that can almost be as a sort of a person you're following as the piece continues, depending on how large your piece is. Okay. And the interesting thing is that oftentimes people think of character only as a person. I'm a character, right? But it doesn't have to be. It is basically something or someone that the reader holds on to for the entire story. So it doesn't have to be a person. It could be a place. You know, there could be a place that is at the center of a revolution. You know, we saw that, you know, with the Herida and stuff. Everybody, that was the place, right? People came and went, but the place had a very specific symbolism that you could build an entire story around, and you did. There were documentaries done about the revolutions and all that stuff around that time. So you definitely want to look at what this character is, if it's a person or a place, a thing, like an object that people are, you know, looking for, somebody's right, like right to do something that the entire story focuses around. But you want to make sure there's like a central character that at the end of this piece, you can kind of say, okay, it was about this place, it was about this person, it was about this, you know, thought that we needed to follow. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do. Find your character, find what you're going to build the story around. The next thing you need to do is find the story or the theme. What are you trying to say? If it's about a place, what about the place? What does that place symbolize? If it's about a person, what about that person? What interesting thing happened to make people want to know more about that person? So you have, that's where it all comes in with the questions I talked to you before. Find your story, find your theme, find your focus. Okay. I think you also, for number 3, I think what you also need is this universal connector, something that the story is representing or that triggers something in people's minds that even if they're not in that specific place or in that specific community or being involved or having to face any atrocity, they can still relate to it. It could be something like freedom. It could be something like, you know, human rights. It could be something about just friendship, you know, things that people just relate to on a universal level. So you want to try to find something. It could be love. I mean, these are all things that universally people understand, family, that people want to kind of relate to, even if the character has nothing to do with their world. All right. In narrative writing, you need to be disciplined. And I add that in here because too often we talk about the craft of finding the story, finding the character, filming it, writing it, whatever. But all of that comes with a lot of discipline and focus, meaning that you don't lose sight of what the purpose is of this story and the fact that you're going to have to rework it a few times in order for the true message to come out. So you need to have a lot of discipline because narrative writing involves taking people on a journey. It involves taking people like through a miniaturized book or television show that you're kind of put together that's real. And because it's real, it has a lot more responsibility put on you. What we talk about when we say narrative writing, it's storytelling is what I said, right? But it's basically a piece of writing that is characterized by a main character in a setting who encounters a problem or engages in something interesting, significant, entertaining, or has a really cool experience. I'm going to repeat that, okay? When you guys are figuring out your narrative journalism, what that means and how to do a story like that, it has to be something, a piece of writing, video, audio, that has a main character. It's characterized by that main character who's sort of like the voice of everything that's happening in a setting somewhere who has a problem, right? There has to be some sort of issue there, even if it's an internal issue, there has to be an issue, or that person is engaging in something that's just really interesting or powerful or significant or fun. That's just as an experience, you think people need to know about it because it's just really cool. So when you think about narrative journalism, think about it as like a really good book or a really good television show that kind of takes you through all of that. There's character development and a problem, and they're basically doing something interesting. Because if they're not, why on earth are you spending your time working on it? So that's some of the stuff that you need to kind of focus on. I want to just talk about a couple of things, which is different types of narrative journalism and narrative writing. The first one is something that we call the character problem solution narrative. And this is the most common type because it seems to have a very normal set way of working, right? Like there's a character, yay, he's a person or thing or place, and some problem presents itself. So you are going to follow the problem, which makes sense because now you have a journey to go to. And then there is some level of solution by the end or hope that a solution is coming. This is by far the most common type of narrative because it's easy. You know, it's newsworthy. I mean, there's just a character going through a problem, and then a solution comes up. Once again, it's a person that could be thrust into a situation either accidentally or intentionally against their will, or somebody that's been so moved by something that they're now on a mission to solve a problem. All right. And everything else around it, the setting, the plot, the problem itself, everything is told through the eyes of the character or characters that you are using in your piece, okay? It's all about character development, how that person grows or doesn't grow throughout this piece, how this person experiences the world, the obstacles that are put in front of them, the challenges. And during this course of this struggle, the main character changes in some way, shape, or form. I have a piece that I want to show you. Can I share my screen, Nihal? Is that okay? Real quick. So I'm going to pull it up. This is a piece that I did. And I'm not showing it to you just so I can be like, do what I do. I'm not saying that, but just to kind of show you that I did this piece, okay? And I'll send you the link later. But basically what this piece is in addition to being a professor and a journalist, I also run a nonprofit here. And the nonprofit organization that I run is called the Prison Journalism Project. And what we do is we go inside prisons around the country here in the United States. The United States has a huge incarceration problem. It's the worst in the world. And we go inside and we teach journalism to men and women of all types. Like we have people that are students, that are people that are, in prison because of drugs or falsely accused of something. We have people that are murderers. We have people on death row that are awaiting the death penalty. So we have all types of people that we work with. So this story, which I've, had in my heart for, I don't even know, for almost 20 years now, I finally started telling it this last year. And so this story came out, and it's basically about how someone that I cared about, someone that I loved very much, how they were incarcerated. And they, Pakistani, American, Muslim, right after September 11th happened, okay? And the reason I show this story, and I'll send you guys the links if you want to read it, is that basically the whole story has me as a character, okay? And it is more of a personal narrative, but it's about a larger issue. It's about what happens to people whose lives are disrupted by mass incarceration, right? Whose lives are disrupted by having someone that they love go in prison. And it's not just a story about going, this happened and that happened and that happened. It's not. It's basically a story about how it slowly changes a person. So what you see is like originally the character me is experiencing this sudden impact with the mass incarceration. I now understand, I'm thrust into this world, right? How it slowly has its impact on me in all ways, right? As a person, as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, as a daughter, everything. And then as the piece goes forward, you see the unraveling, how I'm living through this world now, which is different. And the final end is the solution, which is how, for me, the way I found meaning out of everything was to create the Prison Journalism Project. So when we're talking about, what I've been saying in terms of like the character problem, solution type of narrative, that's an example of that. In my case, it was like a more of a memoir piece, but you can absolutely create something like that with a character that's not you, somebody who you follow, and sort of tell their story about how things have changed, okay? Sorry, my throat is gone. So that's what that's the first type that I was kind of talking about, the character, problem, solution narrative, all right? The last one I want to talk about is the personal experience narrative. And this is where the personal experience is not constructed necessarily around a story problem or something like that, but it's about a significant experience the person has been through, all right? In some ways, my piece does fall into that too, but unlike that, this focus is not just on the character, it's about how the larger issue, right, or activity or setting is revealed. So I wanted to show you guys, it's about an 8-minute piece about called Slavery in the Thai Fishing Industry. And as I mentioned, it was a virtual reality video, but I want you to kind of watch it. Nihal, do you want me to share it or do you want to share it on your end? Because I know do you want me to try to do it? Okay. Let me see, hold up. It's on YouTube. And let me put it up. All right, I don't think it goes.
I like traveling and I like thinking. I came to Thailand illegally looking for work. I arrived here with a friend from my same town. He introduced me to a man who said he could find me a job. The man put me in a shipping container with 20 other people. We immediately knew something was wrong. We were banging on the door, demanding to know what was happening. But nobody responded. We were locked in the container for 2 days. One night, a group of men came, took us out, and we were taken to the pier. We were given fake passports and put on a fishing boat. My friend had sold me into slavery. We were abused and beaten up. We were the fishermen with no words. We couldn't raise our voices. We would work from 5 a.m. to midnight. When we found tuna, we would work 4 or 5 days without sleep. We were given drugs to stay awake. I worked on the fishing boat for 11 years. The fishing boat was very big, like that. My first trip was in Somalian waters. Somalia was the scariest place. Their boats have guns and they would fire upon us. 3 men died on the boat. They named a child Ton and Sunshine. They weren't buried. Their bodies were tossed in the sea. Fishermen lost their hands, their legs. The equipment crushed their bodies. I thought, this is how I'm paying for my sins. I started to miss my mom. I cry a lot too. I miss my home. Most traffickers kidnap people at the market, train station, or at the piers. Some men are taken by force, others are drugged, then kidnapped. Traffickers work with Thai police to take the men, then they share the profit. They don't see us as humans, they see us as animals. One day, the net got caught under the boat, and I was ordered to get in the water to free the net. I remember the waves were very big and the net was swinging in the swell. The safety rope was about to break, and I feared I'd be thrown into the propeller, I would die. I gripped the rope and started climbing, but the captain ordered us to rewind the net. My hand was caught. I couldn't move it. I could feel the machine crushing my bones. I ripped my glove off. I couldn't see my fingers. They were gone. I thought my life was over. I was crying. My whole life wasted. That white ship is a mother ship. A mother ship transferred the fish from many boats at sea. That way, the boats and the men are kept working at sea, never reaching shore.
I know you have to go early because of the buses, so I didn't want to. I wanted to put this on, but I wanted to just sort of explain to you, and I'll send the links to your professor.
When you move the video, would you just show us when you move the video while it's working? Share the screen and the 360, how the interview is done in a 360 video.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about before you guys leave. What you see with the film itself, and you're kind of wondering, okay, they're not moving. When you have it in 360, when he is pointing out to the mothership, or he is pointing out to the lay of the boat, what you're seeing is the camera is actually moving with it. So it becomes very interactive. So all of those aspects of narrative journalism that we've been talking about, what they're using with this really cool technology is that they're allowing you to be immersed in it. So as this character is showing you this problem, he's showing you this experience, the camera is actually moving with it. So you can do a full 360 view of the ocean, of the water, of the fishing boat, of the Somali boats in the corner. And so what it does is it takes the storytelling from just you describing it and saying, oh, the water was very choppy, or the water, the boats are 100, feet away, to actually being able to physically be in that moment and showing the distance, showing the nature of the cramped quarters of a boat, showing the piers or the train station where people are taken from. So in some ways, what you're seeing is that the technology is enhancing the storytelling. So the storytelling is powerful. He's telling you this really horrible story about what happened to him. But once they add the 360 element into it, you're now feeling how horrible it is. You were not just going by his words. You actually can move your phone or whatever you're using, and be in that moment. So what it allows you to do is take your storytelling to another level, where it suddenly becomes beyond just your description. You are now bringing someone right into the experience. But the experience has to be strong. It has to actually engage someone enough that they want to be in that moment, even if it's a scary moment. They want to be in that moment to be able to be part of that scene, which is where it goes back to the journalism. You have to have a strong narrative. You have to have a strong character. You have to have an actual story that's happening. The technology is only going to do so much. It's going to enhance the strength of whatever your material is, but it's not going to make up for any lack of storytelling that's there. So I will send a link and you guys can watch the whole thing, but it's really interesting what can be done. But to always remember that the technology is just an add-on. It's a way to enhance the storytelling, but the narrative journalism has to be the baseline, the foundation of it. So I know you guys have to go, but if I want to make sure anybody has any questions or anything you want to add or ask me. You want to run to your buses?
They're saying narrative is a mix of both.
What's that?
Narrative is a mix of both. The
Yes.
the video and
Yes. They complement each other. It doesn't have to be one or the other. They shouldn't be. Those two things go hand in hand. They're a partnership. So you have to start seeing your projects and you're seeing your stories as a partnership between the story, the characters, and the technology that's bringing their story to life.
okay, thank you very much.
No worries.